Yo, what is good, everybody? It's your boy Golden Falls, Golden What If, whatever you want to call me, and I'm back with part 2 of What If Deku Had a Puppeteer Quirk. It seems like y'all enjoyed part 1, so I was like, you know what, let me get part 2 out as soon as possible. The next upload will be the finale of Wolverine Deku, and then we'll have obviously the compilation or the movie of Wolverine Deku as well. I just wanted to let y'all know about that, and yeah. I'm glad y'all enjoying it enjoyed part 1 because I've been enjoying actually making this series so far. It's been a lot of fun. So I hope y'all enjoy this part. Hope y'all enjoyed part 2. And if you do, as always, make sure to leave a like and sub and all that good stuff. And yeah, that's about it. I won't waste that much more of your time. And let's just get to where we left off. Let's get it. Izuku Midoriya has been accepted into UA, the high school that he has so desperately wanted to get into the entirety of, well, middle school. He's only wanted to get into UA. But UA is obviously one of the hardest and most difficult schools to actually get into. So it's definitely an accomplishment in that regard. Izuku would prepare for his first day. Like I said before, he was a bit under the weather, you could say. More like hurt and injured and healing up, but he should be fine now that he's kind of fully recovered, and he's finally ready for the first day of UA High School. When he arrives at Class 1A. A giant door is waiting for him, and he immediately thinks that there must be some crazy, huge behemoths that are in this classroom. Well, that is to be true, but there are some normal-sized people as well. He walks in and immediately sees Tenya Ida and Katsuki Bakugo arguing, just yelling at each other, and this is kind of a normal occasion for Bakugo. He's that type of guy. He just yells at people for really no reason, and Tenya kind of yells at people for teacher's pet reasons. But with that said, Izuku just minds his own business and goes and sits down. But Bakugo does see him, getting up and immediately telling him off, saying that he doesn't deserve to be here and that his quirk is still so useless that he won't be able to do anything as a hero. Izuku doesn't listen much to Bakugo nowadays, especially after how much he's been training and basically after saving him. I mean, there's really no reason for Izuku to think otherwise, that he can't overcome basically his quirk not being the best or his quirk not being completely optimal. Eventually, more and more students would continue to walk into the classroom, and Izuku would actually see the girl that he saved at the entrance exam. She would thank him a million times over, but Izuku says that, I mean, that's kind of the job of a hero, right? I mean, they're all trying to be one. She didn't really think of it this way, but still thanks him nonetheless. Eventually, Aizawa or Shota Aizawa would walk into the classroom, and he would immediately turn down the tone of happy to completely somber by straight up telling everyone to shut up, sit down, because this is not conversation time. He tells them all that they're going to be tested because, well, frankly, he does whatever he wants in the classroom, and he does whatever he wants in terms of his students. So he tells all of them to get ready, get on their PE uniforms, and get ready for a quirk assessment test. When they all do just that, Aizawa tells the number 1 student, or at least in the entrance exam, to step up and throw this baseball. And immediately, well, Izuku walks up, and Bakugo is furious. He was wondering who got number 1. He didn't think it could have been Izuku. How is this possible? He's such a weakling. His quirk was so useless not too long ago. But Izuku would walk up, grab the ball, not think about anything else other than that. He would channel all of his connection with that said ball. Yes, he made the tennis ball or the baseball into a puppet in a way. But it's more like a connection. A connection with this ball allows him to throw it and extend the connection and push the ball even further. Does this mean it goes 1,000 meters? No, definitely not. But it definitely goes far further than if he just normally threw it. Maybe sitting around 70 to maybe 100 meters, being that he is a pretty strong guy in the first place, and on top of the quirk, he's able to push it a little further. You gotta realize this isn't necessarily the best part of his quirk. In terms of raw strength, his quirk isn't exactly that. And he's not going to press his hand into complete obliteration to push this baseball to space, which he probably could make it go really far if he pushed his arm and his hand to extreme limits, very similar to what he did trying to hold a giant robot still. But there's really no reason to do that. He knows his limitations, and he knows that he doesn't want to destroy his body over that. Aizawa would bring this up, thinking that he's holding back, but Izuku explains that there's repercussions to him pushing that hard, and they all have seen it at the entrance exam, what he did and what happened after the fact. Aizawa smirks and nods his head, thinking that the kid definitely has the brain part of it, or the intelligence part of all this, under wraps. He then steps back and goes back to the line as everyone else begins to follow suit. But everyone begins to basically be all smiley and happy about the testing environment. Aizawa gets very frustrated about this and tells them all that whoever gets last place will be expelled. And as they do this, or as he says this, everyone becomes shocked and takes it far more serious. All of the testing goes relatively normal. I mean, Izuku is in pretty good shape. He did train with All Might, so he's in pretty good shape, and overall he's definitely at a higher peak than a normal teenage boy. And also certain regards like the grip strength and stuff like that, he's able to use his quirk to manipulate it and get really high scores. In terms of the speed aspect of things, it's a little bit harder. If he had his puppets, which he currently does not have, if he did, he could probably hop on top of the puppet's back and move at way quicker speeds. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So the number one student, technically in the entrance exam, actually, doesn't do insanely well. He actually places about middle of the pack, with Bakugo and Todoroki being at the very top. This is something that Bakugo would begin to hold over Izuku's head, but Izuku even says that this test isn't necessarily practical. There's a reason why the practical exam to get into the UA entrance exam is called the practical exam. This test right here is just a show of raw strength, in which Aizawa agrees, saying that is definitely the case, but still there are consequences, and he looks down the list to see who's in the last place, being that of Hagakure. The invisible girl got the very last place, and she is to be expelled. But they'll soon find out that's not necessarily the case. But nonetheless, Aizawa begins to explain how and why this is important, but also not that important. It's exactly what Izuku said. There's really no reason to scale strength in this regard, because this is not how a hero truly scales strength. But he wanted to see the limitations and who had certain quirks, and it's more of a teacher analysis, you could call it. Everybody would be sent off to their other classes and other orientations and stuff like that, and eventually the next day would finally arrive. Hagakure, on the other hand, would be enrolled right back into the classroom. Aizawa would quickly explain that it's actually better this way, given the opportunity to basically test the limitations and see where their mind is at as well. Yes, quirks are important, but the mind is important as well, and especially keeping your head on straight when you do find adversity. Obviously, this would make a lot of sense, and frankly, the class would think that this is actually a good idea overall. But with that said, Aizawa begins to explain to all of them that he won't be teaching them today. They'll be doing heroes versus villain training, in which is going to be with him. And just as he says this, the door would swing open at insane speeds, and a loud "I am here" would be sent throughout the room. It's All Might, the number one hero, the one and only All Might, in which everyone is excited to see, including Izuku, especially because, that's his mentor / teacher at the moment, or for the last 10 months, so they did make some sort of a bond. And Aizawa tells them to listen to All Might and don't do anything entirely stupid. All Might tells them all to get on their hero outfits, in which they all head out to do just that. When Izuku goes and grabs his hero outfit, he also is gifted something interesting. It's a new puppet, or a new doll-like figure, and it's far, far stronger. Some girl by the name of Mei Hatsume decided to actually take the scraps of what happened to the last one and implement basically stronger material and different aspects. She obviously wants some credit when he becomes a top hero, in which she writes in a small note, but still it's her job to make workable products, and that last product was definitely really bad, in which Izuku feels a little offended by, but still, it's okay. He decides to take the gift that he's been given, and he begins to tap on it, feeling that it's super strong, way stronger than he's really ever considered making his dolls or making his puppets. And he begins to move or use it to move, and it feels light. It feels as if it can move without even him moving his hands, without even him thinking. It feels that there's no strain on him. It's odd, but it must be some sort of the metal. Maybe it makes it feel like feathers, like air, like he's just moving throughout the air. He's not sure, but he's happy that he got a new basically thing to work with, and he would arrive eventually at awaiting All Might for the entire class. All Might would begin to explain some things. Explain what's going to happen, heroes versus villains, and the training that's going to occur. And he explains that there's going to be 2 teams here. They're going to have Bakugo and Tenya Ida going up first as the villains, and also Izuku and Ochaku Uraka as the heroes. Now this is perfect, and Izuku is happy that he's going to get this chance to basically team up and see what he can do on a team. But immediately Tenya begins to question if Izuku should be allowed to use his doll. But it's made pretty apparently clear and abundantly clear that he should be allowed to. This is part of his quirk and something that he would utilize in a hero situation. So it's definitely something he will be using. Tenya hears what he's saying, or what All Might is saying, and heads up to the building. Izuku and Ochaku Uraka begin to plan, but the plan is relatively simple. It's really just isolate and, well, dominate. Eventually, Izuku knows that Bakugo will come charging down. There is no doubt about it. The way he acts, the way he approaches things, Izuku can avoid both of them taking any damage by eliminating Bakugo, or at least knocking him out, capturing him, whatever, as soon as possible when he overextends away from Tenya. In which this is exactly what happens. Bakugo comes flying down the staircase and is met with, well, Izuku's doll right in his face, immediately landing a punch straight to his jaw and slamming him into the wall. Bakugo recovers relatively quickly, blasting the puppet, thinking that he would be able to absolutely obliterate it. But that's not the case. The puppet is unscathed and not hurt at all, and Izuku begins to apply pressure using his puppet and also himself. Bakugo believes that he obviously needs to take out Izuku. The puppet is being controlled by him, but every weakness that Izuku has is just made up for by the puppet. He tries to blast Izuku, but the puppet is able to protect him, block the damage, and retaliate with some powerful strikes of his own. This continues on, and eventually Bakugo is completely captured as Izuku lets go of his own puppet to basically stun Bakugo with his own quirk. Izuku uses his quirk to basically make Bakugo stand still for a couple seconds and force him to basically be captured. He's captured entirely, and Izuku begins to run upstairs using his puppet for protection on the off chance that Tenya is waiting with a sneak attack. Both him and Ochaku Uraka arrive at the room that the bomb is currently being held, and they see that it's just empty. There's nothing in the room. Tenya did this to actually reduce the effectiveness of Uraka's quirk, but it doesn't necessarily matter because, well, Izuku just immediately grabs the bomb himself, stringing it over, flying it over toward them, and it lands right in front of them as he touches the bomb, and, well, there it is. They win. Just like that, All Might comes on the intercom and tells them that the hero team has won. An effective way to use Izuku's quirk is definitely as a bit of a bodyguard, and that's kind of what he did, especially with a more, utilized and also more protective version of his doll. It's definitely something that can be effectively used on almost every playing field. With that said, though, the heroes versus villain training is now wrapped up and over. Obviously, after everyone else has had their turn and so on and so forth. They all are available to head home or able to head home, and when they arrive the next day, it's actually more and more development in terms of what they want to be as heroes. Aizawa explains to them that they'll be doing some rescue training. They've done, well, pure power, they've done a heroes versus villains, and now they'll be working on rescuing people. Now, this is a big part of being a hero. Rescue training is something that is taken very seriously, so he tells all of them to take it as such. Make sure that they're on their best behavior, and to head out to the bus and get ready to head off to the USJ, in which they all do. While on the bus and traveling over, they begin to all speak about who they think has the best quirk. The conclusion and overall consensus would eventually come down to Shoto Todoroki. Here's the problem with Izuku. He might have, well, the most potential. Maybe he's even shown that he's far better using his quirk than anyone else can use their own quirk. But his own quirk itself took literal years for him to use it properly. And it still has its drawbacks. And frankly, it's extremely difficult to master, and which Izuku hasn't even mastered quite yet. So they believe that, yeah, maybe his quirk is the best in terms of, well, potential, but the effort that's put into it would not match the output that it would eventually get. In which, Izuku finds that to be fair. It's pretty obvious that his life would have been a lot easier if he had a more simple and more powerful quirk, but still, he believes in his own training, and he believes that he can get to the point that he can be someone like the #1 hero. With the conversation ending, Aizawa tells them to all head off the bus, that they have finally arrived. They have arrived at the USJ, and they're greeted by Pro Hero 13. Pro Hero 13 begins to explain many things about what the USJ is, what they will be doing, and various different rescue centers that they'll be going through. There's some that are in the water, on burning buildings, on giant mountains, on snowy mountains, and on so on and so forth. She explains that there are different scenarios, many scenarios. All these scenarios matter in the feat of trying to save people. That depending on the scenario, it all depends on the approach that you can use, especially with certain quirks. Those who have more destructive quirks might have a harder time rescuing people, but it also depends on the mobility and also the freedom that quirk gives them. And there's more explanations that are to come, but as Pro Hero 13 continues to say these things, Aizawa is directed toward the middle of the USJ by Kirishima. Kirishima begins to ask about fake villains and if they have any, but that's not the case. These are real villains. This is a villain invasion. The villains have come, and their whole goal is to end the life of All Might. But All Might is currently not here. Not being at the USJ, and unbeknownst to the people or all the students, they have no idea why he's not there. Even Izuku has no clue why All Might did not show up. Aizawa tells Pro Hero 13 to protect the children as he jumps in like basically a badass to fight all of these villains that are standing in front of them. He begins to whoop on all of the lower tier villains, but it would eventually lead to Kurogiri splitting everyone up. This leads to Izuku falling in a giant lake. Luckily, Asui, or Suyu, would be able to pick him out of the water and save him from getting, utterly eaten alive by these weird water creatures. And on top of that, his puppet did come with him, luckily enough, because he kind of had it really near him when the warp portals happened. So he currently does have his puppet, which is something that's definitely going to be beneficial. They do talk about an escape plan, but Izuku says that he could just send his puppet down there. It doesn't seem like there's enough of those monstrous creatures or enough of those villains to actually take it out. And during this process, Suyu can grab them and jump across the water. And if they don't make it, the puppet should be able to bodyguard them on the way out. So that's the plan they have in mind, in which Izuku does bring up the fact that Mineta could use his sticky balls and they can kite him or kite all of the the villains toward the center. And once they do that, they should be able to get stuck and at least stall it for enough time for them to get out. In which they do just that perfectly. Izuku jumps off and Tsuyu grabs him and Mineta as they begin to enact their plan. The puppet that he's currently controlling does most of the work, and especially with the high durability that it currently has, it's kind of perfect. It's perfect that that none of the villains can really bite through it and can't really destroy it by any means, and they're able to escape out of the water pretty easily with capturing the villains and making them stay stuck in the water as well. With them getting out of this lake or this pond of a water source, Tsuyu, Mineta, and Izuku are beginning to make their way back to the original spot that they were originally in. But unfortunately, some things would obviously appear. Izuku would see that Aizawa was in trouble, so he decides to send Tsuyu and Mineta off and to help out Aizawa the best he possibly can. A giant monster, a creature that is of ungodly proportions, begins to charge at Aizawa. In the nick of time, Izuku is able to put his puppet right in front of Aizawa, thinking he could block the hit. But as this creature punches his puppet, the puppet implodes, shattering entirely. A puppet that basically took explosions from Bakugo, someone that is extremely powerful in his own right. A puppet that could take damage and seemingly deal it out is destroyed in one singular hit. Izuku immediately thinks to himself that he just got another puppet destroyed and that that's not the most convenient thing in the world. But he heads over to try and help Aizawa nonetheless, and as this giant Nomu creature begins to try and punch Aizawa in the face, it's frozen in place. Izuku begins to hold out both of his hands, holding the monster still, as Shigaraki continues to scream at the monster, telling him to hurry up and, well, kill the brat. To kill Izuku and then kill Aizawa. But as these words are being said, it's seemingly getting harder for Izuku to hold the Nomu still. But as he connects more and more with these strings around the Nomu, he feels something. It's odd. There's someone beneath the skin of the Nomu. There's someone within the Nomu. It's seemingly a person. This person isn't dead though. It's in a weird state of comatose, as if the person is in a coma and this Nomu is currently using the powers of this person. Izuku can feel it, but also can feel the soul of this person. The person beneath the Nomu seemingly not wanting to hurt anyone, not wanting to hurt, kill, or do anything wrong. And Izuku can feel that. For some reason, the feeling of this, the soul within his body, actually helps Izuku. Normally, what he was seeing, and when he would try to puppeteer people, it was the resistance that truly made it impossible. But his puppeteer Quirk makes them far stronger when in full control. But this person, he wants Izuku to be in full control. His quaking hands would begin to slow down, Izuku would stop hurting, and it seems as if his hands were steady as a surgeon. Surgical maneuvers were about to be put into place. Izuku, in full control, puts down his left hand, and Shigaraki, the man that is behind all of this, begins to scream, beginning to say, tell the Nomu to do its job. Kill the brat, kill Aizawa, hurry up, what are you doing? But nothing in response. The Nomu is entirely still. Entirely, in fact, to the point that it's creepy. It's creepy that the Nomu's just staring at Aizawa and Izuku. Aizawa asks what's going on. What's happening? And are they, or did he somehow connect with the Nomu? Izuku gives a little thumbs up at his waist, and well, let's just say the Nomu begins to make the ground rumble by turning back around towards Shigaraki. Izuku then forces the Nomu, or in a way forces the Nomu, to charge forward at Shigaraki. This changes everything. The tide of the battle shifts in a matter of seconds, and the Nomu slaps Shigaraki across the USJ. Kurogiri tries to help Shigaraki the best he possibly can, but even Kurogiri can do very little. The Nomu is able to actually get to the weak spot of Kurogiri, slamming him to the ground and punching his metal armor so hard that it sends shockwaves around the area, knocking Kurogiri unconscious, laying there not moving an inch. Kurogiri, though, is struggling to reawaken. Of course, he's hurt extremely bad, but while everything else is going on around him, his mental, or at least in his mind, he's trying to break free. Izuku can actually weirdly tell that Kurogiri is very similar to this Nomu, but before he could really do anything about it, a portal would awaken or open up, as an awakened Kurogiri would save Shigaraki in a matter of seconds, but unfortunately Kurogiri would be practically out of commission and would pass out directly after that incident. As All Might would finally arrive, everything seemed to have calmed down substantially. The villains were subdued, Shigaraki was gone, Kurogiri was in captivity, or at least was unconscious at this moment, and the Nomu was completely under control by Izuku. But questions began to resume, and they began to ask, or when everyone else and the heroes arrived, they asked Izuku a ton of questions about what the Nomu exactly is. He would explain to his best of his ability, and he would also explain that Kurogiri is very similar, that they should get these two right here locked up as soon as possible, and he might be able to learn some more information about what's going on. As he connects with these beings, it seems that there is a connection that has grown between both of them. Izuku can sense and feel that these people are actual people and they're in a way dormant. But with regular people that have conscious minds and are moving on their own, it's a lot different. He can't control them nowhere near as easily. All Might begins to tell Izuku that he's definitely proud of him and that he's definitely come a long way from the boy that he's seen before. He's definitely becoming a hero that should be proud of himself and proud of the actions that he's taking. Izuku now has a job, something that he didn't even expect to go through. Yes, the USJ was saved. Yes, the people and the children and the kids are now safe, luckily enough, but there's a new hurdle to now jump over. These two people, the Nomu and Kurogiri, seem to be different, but at the same time very similar. Kurogiri seems to be a perfected Nomu, as if it's a Nomu that can kind of react on its own, but has its own agenda based on what the creator of that said Nomu gave it to them. But it's odd. After a long, or basically a couple days, a good long period of time, Izuku doesn't exactly understand what Kurogiri is. He can sense that there's someone within, someone completely different, in which that leads to a lot more questioning, a questioning of how this person looks. Descriptions begin to unfold, and Izuku continues to explain what he sees, but a lot of this time that he's working with the heroes, a lot of it is being restricted, and he's not able to actually participate in a lot of things that are happening at the school. And there are a ton of things that are going to happen. Aizawa is going to have to leave Izuku to it, especially with his responsibilities as a teacher and his responsibilities at hosting or being part of the UA Sports Festival. Izuku is bummed out that he can't really help, but this is an important thing. Well, or he's bummed that he can't participate, but this is an important thing that he needs to basically do. The more they research, the more they look into it, they realize that Kurogiri is someone that is very, very, very close to UA. Someone that Izuku may not know personally, but it is a student of former UA that died while trying to save people, and he sacrificed himself to save a ton of people. A quirk so similar to Kurogiri's, how could they not match this up sooner than they just did? Now this is bad. Something and someone that is this close to UA, how did they do this? How did this even occur? That's something they're not sure of. But this news is going to eventually get to Aizawa. And when it does, well, let's just say Aizawa's connection with this person that is dormant within this so-called Kurogiri, well, it's a connection of best friends. Izuku Midoriya has run into something far, far more complicated than he could possibly imagine. And far more complicated than UA could possibly imagine. Something that if it got out to the public, UA's reputation would be questioned, in fact. But what will happen when Aizawa finds out who this person is behind Kurogiri, all because of Izuku's ability to basically puppeteer the answers out? What will be the next steps for the heroes to basically use this as their advantage? Well, you'll have to find out in the next part of What If Deku Had a Puppeteer Quirk. And if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a sub, and make sure to leave a comment down below, all that good stuff. And I hope all y'all enjoyed, and I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.